Thank you, and hello again, everybody. So yes, I'm going to try and give you some hints and tips to, if nothing else, outline that we are on your side. We are here with the assessments to give you the best possible opportunity to demonstrate the skills and abilities that you have acquired in your studies. So we are on the same side. So let me see if I can talk you through, first of all, why we assess in the way we do. So if I can have the next slide, Fiona. Or can I? Oh, no, it's all right. I've got it. Right. Okay. So we have two key different assessment methods for our exams. We have the constructive response assessments, where you are required to type a response to a question that we set, and we have objective response. Most you will be familiar with the term of multiple choice. We call it objective response because we have different question types that we use through the different levels to create that differential of difficulty through the levels. And the reason that we have these two different assessment methods is to reflect what's expected of you as you become procurement professionals, what your stakeholders expect of you. And with procurement and supply, you really are expected to have a depth of knowledge, and you are expected to have a breadth of knowledge. So that's why the assessments reflect that. Constructive response gives you that opportunity to demonstrate the depth of abilities and skills that you've acquired, and the objective response covers a much wider range of knowledge. Okay, so that's a bit about why we do it this way. So I think we actually had one of the questions on this in one of the chats. So in terms of timings for constructive response, you'll typically get 45 minutes to answer a question. On L5M1, for example, it's slightly less because there's one extra question on that paper. So you need to really plan your timing carefully. It sort of goes back to what Fiona said earlier. You know, we start off very enthusiastically with learning outcome one, and then as we go through, we can sort of run out of steam sometimes. So be aware of that in terms of your exam technique. Read all the questions first before you attempt them, and don't be tempted to spend all of your time answering question one, because then you're sort of doing yourself a disservice when you get to the others. So you really do have to try and spread out your time equally through those questions. You can navigate backwards and forwards when you're actually in the exam. So you can go back and add more to one question where if you feel you have some strengths in particular areas. So that's a bit of a tip in terms of planning your time. Okay, so now, sorry, I'm having some difficulty making these slides move. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about command words in the next slides. In terms of structuring your response to those essay style questions, think about what the question is asking you. Learning outcome, that the question one that you get will always be learning outcome one. Question two will be learning outcome two, and so on. So think about the theories that align to that learning. Think about what examples you may be able to draw from practice, from real life case studies that you've read, or your own experience in an organization. There may be scenarios that have been provided to try and give you that springboard to link ideas to the scenario. What are the bits of key information do you need to get across? And try and make your paragraphs logical to group the ideas together. So there is a notes function in the platform that you can use to just make a few notes before you start to help with that process. So plan for 30 minutes writing, and then in the final 5 minutes, stop, go back, have a quick check through each question, and then you'll find yourself in a very strong place for those responses. Okay, so the objective response questions. So we often get the question, how many questions am I going to get? And it does depend on what level you're sitting. Generally speaking, at level 2, it's 36 questions, or there is one module that has 72. At level 3, there are 72 objective response questions. For level 4, there are 60 objective response questions, and it may look a bit of a surprise to you as you see we've got less than we have at level 3, but what's happening here is the questions are starting to get more difficult. You're having to use more reading time, more thinking time to reach the answer. So that's why there's less of them at level 4. At level 5, there's less again. Again, you've got more reading, you've got more thinking. There are some questions at level 5 where you have to, all of the questions prior to level 5 will be worth 1 mark each. And at level 5, you start to get questions that attract more marks for 1 question. So there's more to do, there's more to read. Similarly, at level 6, obviously that's at the highest level, so the expectations match that. So you've got 42 questions. We have some longer scenarios, for examples, at level 6 for you to read and analyze. Okay, so that's the objective response questions. Oh, and what I should say is do make sure you read all of the answers before you choose. So our sort of human behaviors, as we read the STEM, we think, okay, I'm expecting this answer. And as soon as you read something that's close or close enough to the answer you're expecting, you click it. I'd just say read carefully all of the options, and don't sort of whiz through and go for the first one that seems to match what you were expecting, particularly as you go through the diploma levels, because you know, there may be a combination of principles that we're testing there. Okay, so in the exam. So what I'm going to do now is we spend a lot of time telling you what you should do, and maybe I'll frame this in terms of what not to do. And here we're talking about the constructed response exam and some of the common pitfalls that we see from learners. And what I've done is taken our principal markers report. So each marking team is chaired by a principal who makes sure all of the marking happens to a really high quality. And we ask them for feedback at the end of each exam series. And these are the sort of common things that they will say where learners are falling into these pitfalls, if you like. So this one is framed around a failure to link the answers to the scenarios that are presented. So the sorts of things we read in the marker reports are the better answers use the information from the case study in their answer. So for example, if the question was required you to discuss what type of tender or specification was appropriate, it's the tender or specification that is relevant to that scenario. So that's the expectation at level 4, is that you'll start to draw from those case studies and weave that into your response. Okay, so the next example is a failure to support the answers with relevant theory or models. So again, you can think about what relevant models and theories that you have learnt, and again, you know, use those as within the examples in your responses. So an example might be a question, say, on cultural aspects. You need to, there are theory that could go along with that you would really need for a question like that to be able to respond to it. Okay, so I think we've got another example. Understanding the command word is really key, and I will go into that in a little bit more detailed, but this is a common example that we see from our principal markers, where they will say, you know, that learners sort of didn't take note of the command word, which might have been something like evaluate, and instead of evaluating, they've given really a simple list of bullet point answers, unsupported, lacked detail. So, you know, hopefully you'll gain a better understanding of what's required in the slides in a couple of minutes. Okay, and failure to consider the whole question is another common one, unfortunately. So, for example, we may have asked in a question for the learners to respond to the advantages and disadvantages of something. Or in this example, we set a question about equality and diversity. So that means you need to respond to both equality and diversity, not just sort of pick one of those elements or treat it as if it's one thing. It's equality and it's diversity. There are two distinct things to look at and analyze when you're responding. So do make sure you take time to read the whole question. Okay. So just to reassure you, there are no trick questions. We are, as I said at the beginning, we are on the same side. We want to give you the best opportunity to demonstrate what you have learned. So don't worry about trick questions. If you think an answer is obvious, then it's obvious. And as I said, make sure you read all the options. Don't decide on your answer until you've read them carefully. And with objective response, make sure you attempt all the questions. In fact, with CR, the constructive response as well, make sure you attempt all the questions. We don't take marks off if you get something wrong. So you don't need to worry about that. You need to give your best attempt and work through all of the questions in the test. Okay. So let's talk a bit about command words. So CIPS and other awarding organisations like us, we use a structure called Bloom's taxonomy, which is very tried and tested in assessment. And it's a way of trying to categorise how things get more difficult, if you like, as you go through the levels, from certificate levels through to the diploma, through to the advanced diploma and the professional diploma. And how do we reflect that in terms of what you're learning and what we're assessing? So one of the ways that we go through this sort of categorization of thinking, if you like, is around the command words. So with this Bloom's taxonomy, we sort of start at the bottom of the triangle. The foundation, the underpinning is the knowledge. And then that translates into assessment of what things can you remember. And then obviously it's not enough to just remember things. We need to know that people can understand things. So that foundation of remembering and understanding typically describes what's expected at level 2 and level 3. And then as you advance through, it's then, can you apply that knowledge and that understanding? Can you apply it to a new situation? In order to really be able to apply it well, you then need to be able to break things down into their principles so that you can analyze them and see whether that's right to apply it to this situation. And then you need to evaluate, and this is as you're going further up. So this is the sort of level 5 and the level 6. Can you evaluate that information? Can you predict what impact that's going to have? Can you evaluate what impact it has had? And then at the very top of the scale is, can you create new ideas? So on this slide here, we've got an example of a command word of explain. Now, depending how we use it, you could actually use explain at any of the levels, but we typically use explain at level 4 because we're really asking for you to give reasons or account for something so that it's clear and easy to understand in a relevant given situation. It does require that learners demonstrate the understanding and with some application of the topic. So you're setting out the purposes for and the reasons why. So for example, at level 4, and L4M8 is a good example, you've got a scenario there with every question. So even if we say explain, we are expecting you to weave in some of the situation that is going on in the scenario. Okay, so let's have another look at level 5. So we're more likely to use a command word such as assess for level 5. And what we're saying by assess is we're more than explaining something. We're starting to go up this taxonomy of thinking. We're saying, so can you tell us the importance of something? Can you tell us the relevance of achieving a particular outcome? Think about the options and think about the arguments for and against. And look at the principles and theory in a bit more detail with something like assess. Okay, and then an example of the command word we'd use at level 6 would more like you to use a command word evaluate to show we're right at the top of this thinking triangle now. Can you judge the value and the quality of something, include the strengths and weaknesses, what are the benefits and the advantages and disadvantages of something, and can you make an informed judgment based on the evidence? So again, it's making, if there's a scenario, it's making an informed judgment in terms of how theory, principles applies to that scenario, and what the likely impact is going to be. Or if there's no scenario, can you bring in your own examples from that, either case studies that you've read or from your own organisation? Okay, so to sort of see this laid out so that you can see the difference side by side, I thought, okay, so let's give an example of talking about the 5 rights of procurement. So if I was explaining the 5 rights of procurement, I'd say what those 5 rights are, and I'd probably explain each term. So I might talk about quality and quantity and price. And then if I was assessing still the same subject, the 5 rights of procurement, but I know I need to give a bit more now than just say what they are and a sort of bit of an explanation as to how that applies to procurement. So I'm going to give a wider implication now on the 5 rights. So I'm going to talk about quality, including product, process, management, relationships, quantity, yes, quantity of the orders, but I might be talking about is there enough staff, quantity of suppliers, quantity of price. So I'm starting to widen out that principle. And then I would reflect on why the 5 rights are important and the interlinks between the 5 rights. So that's my assessment of the 5 rights. Now, if I start to evaluate the 5 rights, I'm just going that thinking higher again. So I might say some of the same things as I did when I was assessing. But how do I ensure I get the right quality? How am I going to measure it? What's the impact that's going to be on the price? Am I going to use certain types of specifications to achieve what I want to achieve? So I'm really going into more principles combined with the 5 rights of procurement. And then because I'm evaluating it, you know, are there some disadvantages? Can the 5 rights of procurement, can it be too simplistic sometimes? What kind of situations might it be too simplistic? It has many advantages, but what happens if there are conflicting objectives? What's the trade-off? Are there other rights that need to be added to this? So I'm going right to the top now of creating something new. Should we be adding something else? So that's an evaluation. And I'm hopefully from sort of walking through that, you can see how through the levels of diploma with these constructed response, we would be expecting more from our learners and take the command word as your guide. Okay. So hopefully I've given you more of a indication of how to prepare and perhaps how to practice for your exams. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona now.
Kirsty, thanks. That was really clear, and I know that you know, our learners have been really keen to see how those command words work at different levels. So I think that's been a really helpful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the now the day has arrived. So you really taking you forward to early May. Really, you've done your exam preparation. Really, this is just a slide to remind you that, you know, save the date, put it in your diary, make sure that it's not a surprise that your exam is coming up. And make sure you put alerts on calendars, and you've taken the time off work to make sure that you're going to be fully ready for your exam. And while I know it's really hard to get a good night's sleep before an exam, if you're kind of a bit nervous, it is important to rest before you sit your exam, so you have a fresh mind. While you may not be a breakfast person, my strong advice is eat well before you sit your exam. Your body does need fuel to help it think, and so do try to eat some good food before you start your exam. In my example here is a little icon of an egg, but it doesn't have to be eggs. It can be anything that works for you, but kind of avoid that high sugar stuff. It doesn't tend to really help you with your exam performance. So go for, you know, good cereals or fruit, that sort of stuff that will really kind of nourish your body. Do take time to work out where your exam is. Now, it might well be that you're going to be sitting your exam through a remote invigilation. It might be that you're doing it at home. It might be that you're doing it elsewhere. Do take time to make sure you know where you're going and you've left plenty of time to get where you need to be. If you're doing remote invigilation, make sure that you have downloaded all of the various bits of software and you've set everything up in good time. Panicking on the morning of your exam is not a good thing to do. So please plan ahead and make sure that you know how you're to organize yourselves in advance of your exam. There never seems to be enough time before you sit your exam. So leave plenty of time to get where you need to go, to get yourself organized, more than you think you need, because these things just do tend, with a bit of extra kind of worry, they do tend to kind of cause a bit of stress. So leaving time means that you will be in the best mindset possible. And talking of mindset, exams are a bit of a race. They are stressful. And in order to try and help you focus, many kind of people that are thinking about exams and helping people dealing with the stress of exams advocate something called box breathing to help you focus. And really, it's nothing more than breathing in slowly using the count of 4, and then holding your breath for the count of 4, and then gently releasing that breath over a count of 4, and then holding for a count of 4. And in this way, if you repeat that box breathing 3 or 4 times, you'll find that your heart rate will drop, your focus will increase, you will oxygenate your brain more effectively, and so you'll be in the best place possible to use the knowledge that you've worked so hard over the preceding days and weeks. You can use that knowledge to best effect in your exams, and therefore be the very best and do well in the exam. So while you know all of these things, I'm sure, just to remind yourselves to give yourself time and take time to focus before you sit your exams are hopefully useful reminders for you.